BBC Movies podcast. I'm your host, Ron.I. Joining me, as always, we've got Darren.
Hello, young man.
And Paul.
Yo.
Today, we're going to be talking about the new Steven Spielberg film, The Post, starring Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. Later on, we'll do our rant and rave segment. But first, let's see what's going on inside the entertainment world with...
News on the mark!
Hey, boys.
Hey.
Hey, Ron.
Hey, been a long time since we've seen each other.
Wow.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to
Happy
you.
New Year.
Excellent. First news. Last week, the Oscar nominations came out. Shape of Water is leading the pack with 13 nominations. We still have not had a chance to see that movie.
Probably deserves those nominations, but us three won't ever know because it's only playing across the city from
We're going to
us.
try to see it eventually and do a review on it.
We might have to travel to the lost city of Zed to actually go see it.
Yeah, just about. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor. It sounds great, and we'd really be missing out if we don't review this one.
Yeah, it's high on my list of ones I've wanted to see for a while, so...
Yeah.
From the moment I first saw a trailer, I thought, this has a lot of commercial potential. I can't believe how few screens it's playing on.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully we'll get caught up with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Other nominees, Dunkirk was nominated for Best Picture. Christopher Nolan's first directing nomination. That's a long time coming.
And hard to believe, really, with some of the work he's put out. It's surprising that this is his first nomination.
Absolutely. Get Out, a ton of nominations. Best Picture, Jordan Peele for Best Director. That's great to see. And Daniel Kaluuya.
yeah, for
was
Best Actor. Yeah.
Terrific. He deserves it
Yeah,
too.
they all deserve it. It was a small, out-of-the-nowhere kind of film. Last end of winter, early spring, and it deserves these nominations.
Yeah, it's really kind of
We all really liked it,
all
yeah.
year long. You're right.
It's great to see how much it means to Jordan Peele to get these nominations, because his reaction was, he was quoted as saying, like, it's hard not to ugly cry in front of your friends when you get these nominations. So it means just a little bit
For sure.
to him.
For his first film, that's pretty great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And well deserved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't think of too many people who were nominated for their directorial debut.
Directorial debut,
I
yeah.
know
Exactly.
John Singleton was. Orson Welles was.
Orson Welles was.
Nice company.
Yeah.
Not bad.
For sure. Phantom Thread picked up a bunch of nominations. Surprising. It was kind of an underdog in the award season, but it finished strong with Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Daniel Day-Lewis's final performance. They're really
Another final
advertising
performance.
that. Yeah, I know.
Oh, he's retiring again, is he?
Yeah. Best Supporting Actress nominee. Can't remember her name. That one looks great. I love Paul Thomas Anderson, so I'm planning on seeing that one.
I look forward to that.
That
Yeah,
one too.
I look forward to it too.
Mm-hmm. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri continues to get a ton of praise.
It looks fantastic. I
It
can't
looks
wait
great.
to see that.
Frances McDormand, I think, is the lock for Best Actress for that one.
Mm-hmm.
Has she ever given a bad performance?
I don't think
I
so.
don't think so.
She's just a little force of nature, that one.
Mm-hmm.
See her at the Golden Globes when she won?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, Megan said, she's a little
Strutting
weird,
herself.
isn't she? And I said, she's married to one of the Coen brothers. She goes, oh, okay, yeah, that,
Right, there you
that
go.
explains it.
I think the lock for Best Actor right now seems to be Gary Oldman for his portrayal of Winston Churchill in The Darkest Hour.
Mm-hmm.
That was also nominated for Best Picture. Gary Oldman's a long time coming, too, for some recognition from the Academy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. He's a tour de force in almost everything he's in. It doesn't matter what it is. He usually turns in a very memorable performance.
Yeah, from the Sid and Nancy days.
He said recently there's maybe 2 performances of his ever that he's proud of. So I wonder how this will fit in with that.
Wow.
I disagree with him.
Yeah, I disagree with him quite a bit too.
Oh, that's funny. Any other nominations, Best Picture-wise? The Post, of course, was nominated. We'll be talking about that.
Yeah, The
one
Post,
later.
Lady Bird, the usual
Lady Bird,
movies
right.
from over the course of the year we would have
Mm-hmm. I,
expected.
Tonya picked up a few nominations for acting.
That looks very good.
It does, doesn't
yeah.
it?
Yeah.
That movie could have been
Yeah.
just a train wreck of kind of a gossip-type movie, but it's been getting a lot of praise.
Mm-hmm.
What about the animated field, Paul?
I've always got a very vested interest in the animated category. I've seen 2 of them. I would expect, Ron, you and I loved Coco, and if it wins, which I would expect it to, it's very well deserved. This is such a great movie. I loved The Breadwinner, too. It's from a smaller studio, obviously, but anytime a movie from a smaller studio even gets nominated, it's good to just bring it into the people's consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I would say about this category this year is that it's unfortunate that it seems to be more beyond these 2. It seems a little more generic in the other nominations like Baby Boss and Ferdinand. And not that I've seen those movies, so maybe they are great, but I just look at last year's where you had like Red Turtle, you had My
Tower.
Life as a Zucchini, you had Tower. Those were things that looked a little more interesting and had the potential to maybe broaden people's horizons and idea of what animation could be. And whereas this year it seems like what you would expect it to be, just the highest grossing animated movies, which as we know doesn't mean that they're the best ones. So
Right.
we'll see how it plays plays out.
I won't be disappointed if Coco wins, that's for sure. But if the breadwinner wins, that'd be nice too.
I'd love for either one. If they could split it, that would be great. But yeah, I expect Coco to win. But Breadwinner's an amazing movie, and whether it wins or loses, people should get out and see it. It's fantastic.
Any other smaller categories you want to talk about?
Well, speaking of animation, fellas, I'm very into a short film called Dear Basketball, which is Kobe Bryant's tribute to the sport that made his career and made him who he is. Poignant, heartfelt film that he co-made with the great legendary Disney animator Glenn Keane, which I have no doubt Paul's a big fan of.
Yep.
And a little composer named John Williams actually scored this movie for them.
Can you spell that?
He's won 1 or 2 awards or the 1 or 2 Oscar nominations himself during his career, so I think...
He just beat the record again, beating himself. He's the most living nominated man or person.
What's he up to now, like 51 or 52 or something? Yeah.
He's got a way to go to beat Edith Head, who is the famous costume designer.
Yeah, worked on every movie from the 30s to the 60s. Right. But surprisingly, John Williams was nominated not for The Post, but for The Last Jedi, which is interesting.
We'll talk about that later. Yeah, that's an interesting category I'd like to check out. I've always said if the Academy was smart, they would put all of these live action and animated shorts onto an Academy website for easy access for everybody to see.
Exactly. Very few people will see 10% of these films, so that's too bad.
And it makes more sense to put these into the public consciousness so that people watching have a more vested interest in each of these smaller categories. So it holds their interest rather than just waiting for the big...
Exactly. They go to the fridge to get a snack while their, animated short or documentary short is being presented. Well, let's have people care about these categories.
You got it. In more of the visual effects and stuff, it looks like Blade Runner and Star Wars, they're leading those categories.
Not surprising. Both visually dynamic movies, there's no question.
I'd like to see War for the Planet of the Apes take it for visual effects this year, as that franchise deserves it for what they've achieved.
Yep, agreed.
I know Blade Runner wasn't very popular, but I would love to see Roger Deakins finally get an Oscar for his cinematography in that.
I agree.
That man deserves an Oscar for sure.
Yeah, the smaller categories can be fun. The more you know.
I'm a big fan of the technical awards. I'm always interested.
Yeah. March 4th, I think, is the award show. And hopefully we can do another Oscar show this year, and we'll chat about what we think the day after or so.
I'm sure we will.
Okay. In other news, the new Mutants film, that's from Fox, their spin-off from the X-Men series, has been delayed 10 months until February 22nd, 2019. A lot of speculation as to why. The director, Josh Boone, says they're going for a scarier type of movie. I guess the movie tested okay, but not great. And I guess they want to go all the way with the darker elements. In fact, he said he wants to make it the hardest PG-13 ever made. We'll see what that means. Some people have speculated this might have something to do with the Disney-Fox deal, and maybe this isn't a movie that's going to fit in with what Disney and Marvel want to do. Who knows? We'll see.
If they embrace the darker aspects of it and make it more like a horror film, I'm all for them delaying that and getting it right. All we've seen is that brief trailer, and it looked interesting enough to me. I mean, the comic book genre of movies has reached the point where it's not good enough to just put one out. Now people have seen enough of them. They can take the chances. They can do something a little more...
What else do you got?
Interesting. Exactly. Like you look at a Logan, and that was so great because it was so different and explored areas that we haven't seen yet. So hopefully they kind of embrace that idea and run with it in this. I guess we'll see.
Speaking of Logan, yeah, that was too bad. It didn't pick up more Oscar nominations. I was really hoping for Best Actor for Hugh Jackman. And even Best Picture. I know it's going to be in my top 10 of the year.
Yeah, it could have got a Best Supporting Actor nomination as well for Patrick Stewart.
Absolutely.
All great work, but it did get for Best Adapted Screenplay, which is very well deserved.
Yeah, I think it just came out too early in the year for the Academy to remember.
And it was fighting against Get Out from movies that early in the year, and Get Out's buzz.
Good point.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So, we'll see what that new Mutants film has in store for us next year, apparently. Okay, in other comic book news, it looks like Scarlett Johannson is going to receive the biggest payday for any actress in Hollywood history for the Black Widow movie. Marvel Studios is finally moving ahead with that long overdue project. Good news.
Yeah, it's about time. Her character's been so supportive in the MCU so far. It's nice to see her front and center.
And there's so much story aspect you can explore in that, like go into her espionage background and spy for Russia or whatever. But you could really take that character in really interesting directions and flesh out her character rather than just being there for support, but really kind of shine a light on some of the lesser known aspects of the character.
She is definitely one of the more interesting backstories of anyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it could be great.
I agree.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, I would say that's probably going to be part of their Phase 4 announcement. Spider-Man is starting it, and then Guardians of the Galaxy 3 has already been announced, and this one might be maybe the third film out.
It'll be a whole different landscape by the time we get there.
It could be, yeah. Okay, in other casting news, Big Little Lies is going ahead with the second season. That's good news for fans of that. I loved it. It was Kelly's favorite show of that year. They've got a little casting coup. Unbelievable. Reese Witherspoon, Laura Dern, and Nicole Kidman were the stars of the first series. And at the end of the show, they kind of became a little bit of a tight-knit group. So if you're looking to bring in an actress that could possibly be formidable enough to go against them, who could you possibly want but Meryl Streep, which is pretty amazing.
That is awesome.
It's going to be great. The role she's playing is going to be of Nicole Kidman's mother-in-law, who's coming to visit and figure out what happened in the events of season 1. Anyone who has seen it will understand. Boy, it sounds just great. Really juicy role for her and high expectations. As for HBO, since Game of Thrones isn't coming this year, no Westworld season 2, no Curb. You know, this is probably going to be the only project from HBO I'm really looking forward to this year. So, good news.
It's a good black hole to fill. And that's a stacked cast. Like when you talked about it before, it sounded like an interesting show. But that cast is incredible. So,
And as much as I think I said this before, it's as much as you might think it's a show for women, I completely enjoyed it. It's gender neutral for your enjoyment of it.
It's not Desperate Housewives is what you're saying.
Right, exactly. Right. It's very smart and very well made.
You had nothing but good stuff to say about it when you talked about it on the podcast earlier.
Yeah, so check out the first season of that. No idea when that's coming, probably maybe in the summer. Okay, that's it for news this week. Shall we move on to our feature review?
Post haste.
So, can I ask you a hypothetical question?
Oh, dear, I don't like hypothetical questions.
Well, I don't think you're going to like the real one either.
Do you have the papers?
Not yet.
This is a devastating security breach that was leaked out of the Pentagon. The most highly classified documents of the war.
The Times has 7,000 pages detailing how the White House has been lying about the Vietnam War for 30 years. The way they lied, those days have to be over.
Okay, people are concerned about having a woman in charge of the paper, that she doesn't have the resolve to make the tough choices.
Thank you, Arthur, for your frankness.
Let's do our jobs. Find those pages.
You're talking about exposing years of government secrets.
Is that legal?
What is it you think we do here for a living, kid?
Ben, I might have something.
It must be precious cargo.
It's just government secrets.
The New York Times was barred from publishing any more classified documents dealing with the Vietnam War.
If you publish, we'll be at the Supreme Court next week.
Meaning?
Well, we could all go to prison.
The Post was written by Liz Hanna and Josh Singer. It stars Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks, Bob Odenkirk, David Cross, Bruce Greenwood, Sarah Paulson, Michael Stuhlbarg, Bradley Whitford, Alison Brie, and Jesse Plemons. What a cast. I'll give you the IMDb synopsis. A cover-up which spanned 4 presidents pushed the country's first female publisher and her hard-driving editor to join an unprecedented battle between the press and the government. Okay, Paul has not seen The Post.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, but he will sit in with us anyways as we give our thoughts on it. Darren, would you like to begin?
I really enjoyed this movie. It's very good. It's hard for me to find anything that I didn't like about it. Wonderful performances, great direction as you'd expect from Spielberg. His technical support, such as cinematography of Janusz Kaminski and composer John Williams, editor Michael Kahn, everyone's in top form. Might not crack my top 10 of favorite Spielberg films, but you're looking at Steven Spielberg, so that's not to say there's anything bad about this movie. It's a fantastic flick, and it deserves all the praise it's getting. I liked it a lot.
And were you that familiar with the subject matter?
I knew a little bit about it. I am a bit of a history buff, so I'm more into ancient history than stuff this modern, but a bit
like
before my time.
1960s?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a bit before my time. I'm being born in 76, but I was aware generally of what this was all about. And so, no surprises plot-wise.
A timely story.
A timely story for sure. I guess, that's something we should mention. It's no secret. Spielberg made this as a way to boost the cachet of the press and what many would call the most important aspect of any democracy is a free press. When you have a president who's currently trying to undermine the press at every turn, Spielberg took this as his opportunity to counter Trump and say, well, this is what the free press can do.
You got it. For anyone out there who doesn't know the history, I'll give you a little brief insight into it. This is all pre-Watergate. This is Nixon's still in his first term of office when all of this happened. There's a man named Daniel Ellsberg who worked for the RAND Corporation, which was kind of subsidiary of the U.S. government, or the Defense Department.
Yeah.
And he had access to all of these files on the Vietnam War, which proved that the American government had been lying for years and years, president after president, about the state of the war and
the potential for their ability to win.
Right. And he had enough and decided to steal these classified documents and hand them over to the New York Times. Who then had to decide whether they wanted to print classified material or not. Basically comes down to that question is the interest of national security versus the interest of the American people to know what's going on.
It's a good thing you mentioned it is pre-Watergate, and maybe that Watergate as a historical incident kind of overshadowed this, I think. And that's why I think a lot of people are less familiar than they are about Watergate when it comes to the Pentagon Papers. And
even though the ramifications of what Nixon did with Daniel Ellsberg and his revenge strategy towards him completely led into the plumbers and Watergate. And,
exactly, yeah.
All of those.
A direct result, yeah.
Right.
For sure.
So I love this movie too. I totally agree with you. It's not nearly my favorite Steven Spielberg film. It might not even make my top 10 of the year, but it's still a very good movie.
It's very good.
Well worth seeing. And the performances are great. Maybe it was just a little by the numbers for me because I did know the material. It's no All the President's Men for me, which I think is the greatest movie about journalism ever made. I still really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, to say there's no surprises here is not to say there's anything deficient.
I know, right.
It's just, it's the way a movie like this plays out. And I don't know, do you know the history as well to know whether or not it was just a function of the screenplay that the sale, the post going public, that was all happening exactly concurrent?
Yeah.
So that is quite the coincidence.
Right.
And it does make for some good suspense in the film for sure. So yeah, then it follows history quite well then too.
There's a big moment in the film with Kay Graham. That's the character Meryl Streep plays, who's the owner of the paper. And there's a moment where she has to make her big decision, you know, and everyone is telling her to go one way and she goes the other way. I don't know if it happened quite like that. I hope it did, because that is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like just very good screenwriting.
It does.
I mean, she's a great character, and I have no doubt in my mind Meryl Streep would have based as much of her performance as she could off the real character, and so it feels probably pretty truthful, even if word for word it didn't happen like that.
And she is terrific in this.
Yeah, to say, I mean, Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, both at the top of their game, and have been for years. They are wonderful. A lot of the supporting actors in this are getting a lot of praise, very deservedly so.
Can you see why Meryl Streep was nominated and Tom Hanks wasn't, though?
She has maybe a bit more of a showy. Yeah.
Her character is more of the defining character, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Tom Hanks plays Ben Bradley, the editor of the paper, and he's constant throughout the film, right? He knows what he wants from the first minute to the last minute. He doesn't change in his beliefs. His character doesn't go through the same process that she does, which I think gives the character a bit of an edge.
Exactly. Tom Hanks is wonderful. Sounds like there was also a lot of good performances this year for him to go up against.
Jason Robards won the Oscar for playing him in All the President's Men as Best Supporting Actor, so he did have some stiff competition.
Yeah, for sure.
And he's not quite as good as that, but he's still really good.
He's very good, yeah.
For the supporting cast, fans of Mr. Show, the old HBO show, get quite a treat with Bob Odenkirk and David Cross being in it. I thought that was just fantastic to see these two guys flanking Tom Hanks in a Steven Spielberg film. They've come a long way.
Exactly. When I was watching reruns of what is probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite sketch comedy show, Mr. Show, Bob Odenkirk and David Cross are wonderful. They're very talented. But yeah, exactly. Who would ever think they'd be reunited here under the direction of Spielberg, acting beside Tom Hanks? And they're both great. Bob Odenkirk,
particularly.
He's getting a lot of praise, and deservedly so. He's fantastic.
Do you guys watch Better Call Saul?
I actually just finished season 2. I love that show, and I love Bob Odenkirk.
He is great.
He's fantastic. He has a very good way of portraying the sleaze in a way that you can actually still cheer for a slimy kind of lawyer.
Oh, he's decent inside. He's got a heart. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good show. Any other supporting roles you want to talk about?
Can't remember his name now. The actor who played Ellsberg. I thought he was very good.
Damn, I don't have his name here.
Yeah.
Michael Rice, maybe?
Yeah, I think you're right. I remember looking him up in the credits as I was sitting there after the movie, and yeah, I think you might be right. Michael Rice. I thought he was very good. And Alison Brie, I barely even recognized it was her. She's very good in it.
I will say I thought Sarah Paulson was kind of wasted as Ben Bradley's wife. It's really just kind of the supporting wife role.
Carrie Coon is wonderful in this. I'm a big Carrie Coon fan. I have been since I first saw her in the first season of Leftovers, and then
She's in Fargo, too.
Which season 3?
In season 3.
Okay, I haven't got as far as season 3 yet. And Gone Girl, where she played Ben Affleck's sister. Anyways, she is very good in this as well. I thought she gave one of her best performances ever.
Matthew Rice.
Matthew Rice? Okay. Right. Matthew Rice.
Jesse Plemons shows
Jesse
up.
Plemons.
Does he have to be in everything right now?
You mentioned
everything
that
good?
in several podcasts ago, like back in the spring or summer, you said he's in everything, and he remains in everything. He truly is.
Yeah, and he's great in it.
Almost like a chubbier faced Matt Damon, but he's
also in a new episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah, that's right. He is. He is this season.
He's really popping up all over the place. Always nice to see Canadian Bruce Greenwood. He played Robert McNamara.
Right. Oh, he was very good as McNamara.
You ever need a president or a general? He's always your guy in movies like that. He's a go-to for a politician.
Yeah, for sure.
He's somebody that usually brings like an instant weight to the character just because of his distinction and just even the weight of his voice too.
Yeah,
right?
we've seen McNamara portrayed many times in the movies, and this is one of the better ones, I'd say for sure. As just an indicator of level of trust, and obviously Spielberg has had no longer-lasting collaborator than composer John Williams. Spielberg has been so entrenched with the post-production of Ready Player One, he didn't preview any of John Williams' score for this film. They spotted the film, and then he said, okay, go write the music. And Spielberg didn't hear it until the recording sessions. And if that doesn't indicate a level of trust, I don't know what does.
Wow.
And it's a wonderful, subtle score. It's
subtle, for sure.
It's subtle, and
And minimal.
It's minimal. There's probably, feels like about 30 minutes of music in the film. And the film doesn't need more than that. It was scored perfectly. There was some good hit the presses montage kind of music that was really good. And then some subtle sort of Americana.
But frankly, between the two, wouldn't you have rather seen him score Ready Player One if he had to choose two projects?
It depends. I mean, he had just scored The Last Jedi, which has like 2.5 hours of music, wall-to-wall, big blowout action scoring in it. So I don't know, John Williams, does he want to do another one of those right after? Or I could see this being a movie that has more intellectual interest for an artist to be involved with anyways.
All right.
I would have liked to have seen him score both, but
yeah,
that wasn't going to happen. So if I had to choose, I think I'd go with the post.
It was just so minimal. I really barely noticed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're much more attuned to it. Maybe on another viewing. As for the film itself, it sounds like we're both pretty big fans of it. Very timely. A woman in a man's world and freedom of the press. You can't get two bigger topics going on right now.
Exactly. We're living in an era when one man has a lot of influence and he shouldn't, but all he has to do is declare the two idiotic words, fake news, and half the country will believe him. Yeah, no better time to promote the greatness of what a free press can do than right now.
And an important story that I think most people should know about.
Yeah, very important too, for sure.
I wouldn't say it ranks as one of the great films about journalism. I wouldn't put it as high as All the President's Men or even Spotlight.
I was actually going to ask you guys how it ranked with that, because I saw Spotlight after its notoriety at the Oscars, and I loved it. I thought it was great.
Spotlight is, I think, a much more kind of nuts and bolts movie about journalism and hitting the street type of thing.
That's very much a journalistic procedural. This is not. It's more about, the bigger picture. No, it's not as good as either of those two movies either, but I mean, All the President's Men is a masterpiece. Right. One of the greatest films of all time, let alone journalist films of all time. And Spotlight, I would say, edges out The Post too a little bit. But The Post will probably end up, there's still a lot of movies I need to catch up with for 2017, but The Post, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up in my top 10 of the year.
So just because we opened the show with Oscar nominations and maybe the people missing, can you guys see why Spielberg didn't maybe get a Best Director nod for it? Is it maybe because it is so paint by the numbers that it doesn't have his stamp?
Not so much paint by the numbers. It's a subtle directing job too. There's nothing showy about this film,
and he's not doing anything he hasn't before, I would say.
Yeah,
but still worth seeing.
Yeah,
absolutely worth seeing.
Without a doubt. Okay, I think we've covered that pretty good.
You guys don't need to do any spoilers or anything.
That's the thing with this movie is, there's not really
there's
spoilers.
no worry about spoilers. We could say how the court case comes out, but even that, why do you even need to talk about that?
If you really need to do that, just look it up.
Right, if people don't eventually know what happened to Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
I will say the ending of the movie is the very ending. Leads you right into all the President's Men if you want to do a nice double bill.
Oh, yeah. I think Spielberg might have done that intentionally to have them as kind of back-to-back views.
Yeah, if Nixon thought he was out of hot water, no, he was just getting into it. Yeah. Okay, why don't we move on to our Rant and Rave segment?
Okay, let's do it.
Paul, you haven't talked for a while. Why don't you go first?
Sure. Got a couple things to talk about. Apparently, I've been on a bit of a documentary kick the last little bit. The first thing I'd like to talk about is a Netflix documentary called Icarus. It follows the story of an amateur cyclist. He decides to be his own science experiment, for lack of any better way of putting it. It's following the whole Lance Armstrong fallout. So he's decided he's not really making any progress in his cycling career. Gets the idea of like, well, what if I start doping? What effect is that going to have on my body? Not that he's really expecting to make a career out of it, but he just wants to see how much doping will improve his performance. So he decides he's going to embark on this journey, and he decides he's going to document it. So, of course, if you're going to dope, you have to have ways of beating all the testing and everything. So he decides he's going to embark on this really big cross-country race in France, and that's where he's going to really start testing and doping. And so his journey through doing this, like I mentioned before, if you're going to dope, you've got to have ways of not getting detected. So he's got a friend that says, oh yeah, I'll help you. And he's actually involved with the American athletics to some degree. And not that he's going to help him beat the testing, but he's going to monitor him and his progress and that kind of stuff. Well, his friend that's involved in the American athletics gets cold feet and decides he's not going to do it. So he's got a friend that he can put him in touch with. Who's the friend? Only the lead tester of the Russian athletic department that did all the testing for Sochi, all the Russian athletes. And this guy kind of plays both sides. He does the testing, but he also helps athletes beat the testing.
Oh, no better to help you beat testing than a Russian tester.
Exactly. And
it didn't do the Russians much help in this Olympics.
No, that's true.
No, but this starts out really early. Like this, they're talking about the Rio Olympics and everything. So this seems very timely with, of course, Russia being banned from the upcoming Olympics. It's a very interesting journey because it goes from this unknown cyclist and kind of the effects of the doping on him to you're seeing everything unfold of the downfall of the Russians and the doping scandal that was to follow, to the point where my wife Melanie thought this was a recreation of the event. She's like, this isn't the real people, is it? And I was like, no, this is actually happening on film. It was just one of those things where happy circumstance as far as a filmmaker goes, where you embark on making one film and it quickly transforms into a completely different film than the one you intended to make. And it's a very interesting journey, and it's crazy. It's incredible. So, and I don't want to say too much other than that. As with all movies, it's something that you really have to experience, but well worth checking out. And it's actually been nominated for Best Documentary at the Academy Awards this year. So, and it's on Netflix, so it's easy to check out and well worth checking out.
I'm curious to know how much just doping alone improves one man's game.
In a short amount of time, it increased his performance 20%.
Really?
Yeah. He was noticing how much more strength he had in his legs for going up long inclines, and even just his overall endurance. He said he felt stronger, and just looking at the statistics, 20% in not a very long amount of time, like over a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and it's interesting because the documentary starts out with all these famous athletes that have been since caught that had at one point, just like Lance Armstrong, vehemently denied taking any, steroids or drugs to help enhance their performance, and then them later backtracking saying, yeah, I doped. I totally was cheating the system. So
now that I've been caught, yes, I was doping.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's about 2 hours long. And, like I said, with the Olympics coming up shortly, it's very timely, and I found it extremely interesting.
Sounds good.
And then the second thing that I have to talk about is a docudrama on Netflix called Wormwood. Have either of you guys seen this?
I'm very excited about seeing it.
I've not seen it.
I love Errol Morris. He's one of my favorite documentarians of all time. And I'm very interested in this because it has actors in it, right? It's not quite a documentary.
It's got Peter Skarsgård in it. And so it's a hybrid of a documentary and a drama. The dramatic aspect of it is based on what they piece together to be the events that transpired. And then, of course, they're going to add some dramatic flair. I mean, there's conversations that nobody other than the people that were there could tell you what happened. But it's very interesting to see people's interpretation of what happened. So the base of the story is that in 1953, this CIA scientist, quote unquote, jumped or fell out of a window in New York City to his death. And that statement alone kind of sparks this journey for this man's son, who was, I believe, 9 years old at the time. And he's like, well, isn't it one or the other? How do you either jump or fall out of a window? Like, they're very distinctly different. And so it just follows the journey and this very personal journey of the son, who even to this day hasn't let it go, following the journey of the revelation of facts. Like 20 years later, they reveal that this man was, unbeknownst to him, being tested on the effects of LSD by the government. So there's all the fallout of that, which very much falls into what you guys were talking about with the post, with trust of the government and secrets of the government, and just how the son couldn't let it go and was always striving to find out more and more of what exactly was going on, who was involved, what the cover-up was. And it's really interesting to see, like, it's a 6-part series and they're about 40 minutes each. It's interesting to see story changes as it goes, as far as, like, the son says at one point, you know, the thing about a cover-up story is over 30 years, the people kind of forget what the cover-up story was. So you start seeing some cracks in what was being told. And it was very interesting. I'd say maybe at times it felt a little long, but like I said, it's 6 episodes at 40 minutes, so it's not like it's all consuming. But yeah, it's very interesting to follow the journey of truth, so to speak, and just the effect that even seeking out the truth, what toll it has on the family, on even this man's life and everybody involved. So this is really interesting. I really enjoyed it. Definitely worth checking out.
So does it feel more like a drama, like an actual show, or a documentary?
It really is a hybrid. It really feels like both. They complement each other very well, and it's just nice to see the context, the personal context that's going into what you're seeing and possibly situations that went on. So both parts are equally interesting.
So the recreations aren't just recreations. It's like watching an actual drama.
Yep.
I see. That's interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they portray different versions of what could potentially have happened as facts are presented. And
because I know a little bit about the case. And would you say the series has a satisfactory resolution?
I think it's as satisfactory as you can expect.
As much as they can do, right?
Because it's one of those things where you're never going to have that 100% answer.
Clearly still a cover-up, right? So
yeah, and with people that were involved in the case no longer being around to ask questions and for clarification, there's no way you're going to get 100% closure on it. But to me, it was as interesting to see the unfolding of facts as it was the toll that this had on this family and what it did to this family and people that were involved. It was really interesting.
Does it get into the MK Ultra programs and some of the mind control stuff that the CIA was doing?
They mention it briefly. It is, from my recollection, it's mainly focused on this specific case, but they do talk about, like, why are they doing the LSD testing and what was going on at the time and the circumstances surrounding the events. So
sounds good. I love Errol Morris, and I've never been disappointed in anything he's done. So
all the performances are really good. When I heard docudrama, I was worried that how sometimes there's those dramatic reenactments and it's very wooden acting that, for me, almost takes you out of it. It's high quality, high production, and it complements the actual interviews with the son very well.
That sounds great.
Highly recommend.
Sounds good.
Cool. Darren, you want to go next?
Sure, I'll go next.
All right.
I'll start out with Captains Courageous, the Franz Waxman collection from Entrada Records. This is the same company that put out that big 10 Commandments box set that I reviewed on an earlier podcast. So this is 4 CDs spanning several decades in Franz Waxman's career. 13 scores are represented in as much material as they could salvage. A lot of these are really old and survive only on not great sources, acetate discs and so on. A couple of them are represented by really good sources. But just to put this in context, a little bit about Franz Waxman. Kind of a rising star in the European music scene. He was living in Germany, 1930s. He performed with a jazz combo called the Weintraub Syncopators. Kind of a fun name.
That's awesome.
They performed in nightclubs. He was beginning to score more and more movies and trying to hone his skills as a concert composer as well. When in 1934, he was jumped by a gang of Nazi thugs and beaten senseless in the streets. And he said to himself, I see how it's kind of going for Jews under Nazi Germany. I'm out of here. Wow. Fortunately for he and his future family and the world of music appreciation, he was one of those Jews who had the foresight to get out when the getting was good and moved first to Paris and then the United States, settled it quickly in Hollywood. His first film score in Hollywood was The Bride of Frankenstein for James Whale. So 80 years later, that's still considered one of the greatest, most influential film scores ever written.
And the movie's fantastic.
The movie is fantastic too. I mean, I'll give you a short overview of some of the movies he scored that aren't included on this collection, just to put it into context of how great of a composer we're dealing with here. And if you get the sense that I'm a Franz Waxman fan, then you are right. So he was under a contract to Universal and RKO and Warner Brothers early in his career, and then went one of the very few composers who was able to work freelance, not under contract to the studios. He was so in demand, and unlike Bernard Herrmann, people liked him, so he got lots of work. After Bride of Frankenstein, he scored movies such as other horror movies like The Invisible Ray, Rebecca, one of 4 Hitchcock movies he scored. He worked on The Philadelphia Story, Flight Command, Destination Tokyo, Mr. Skeffington, To Have and Have Not, Objective Burma, Dark Passage, Sorry Wrong Number, Night in the City, Sunset Boulevard, A Place in the Sun, for which he won back-to-back Oscars for Best Original Score for those two, a feat that would not be repeated until the 2000s when Gustavo Santaolalla won back-to-back Oscars for the spectacularly forgettable music for Brokeback Mountain and Babel. That is a farce if ever there was one. He worked on My Cousin Rachel, Stalag 17, Prince Valiant, Demetrius and the Gladiators, The Silver Chalice, Taras Bulba, and I'm just up to the mid-50s here. This collection contains as much music as they could salvage from Captains Courageous, The Spencer Tracy, Jekyll and Hyde, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, A Christmas Carol, Woman of the Year, Count Your Blessings, Love on the Run, Fury, which was
Spencer Tracy.
Yeah, the Fritz Lang's American debut.
Yeah.
Hitchcock's Suspicion, The Devil Doll, and King of the Roaring Twenties, The Story of Arnold Rothstein. This set itself was about 13 years in making, I think, for them to just find and restore and compile all the material. It was only $40 US for 4 CDs and about 4 to 5 hours of music, 4.5 hours of music. It's wonderful. For fans of Golden Age film music, this was a great set. I thought things like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Captains Courageous were lost to time, and we would never see that music on compact disc, so it's wonderful. Hitchcock's Suspicion is another favorite of mine, and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Waxman was a great composer, one of my favorites, and I recommend this set highly to fans of old film music and maybe even fans of old film. You'll find a lot here to enjoy.
That's awesome. You can burn all those discs for me anytime.
I'll try and remember to get on that for sure, yeah.
So here's a question that's more out of ignorance than anything else. For a lot of this older music, you're a musicophile, obviously. Is there a way of collecting it other than physical media? Like if somebody wanted to just acquire it through digital means?
In a lot of the cases with these record companies who are, they're not Sony or UMG, they're pretty small independent record labels. Most of their deals do not include being able to do downloads. So a lot of these are, pretty much only available as physical copies. Sometimes you can find them as downloads, but for the most part, no.
And it sounds like the preferred way of consuming this music really tends to be CD anyways.
Yeah, I mean, there's, no better format for, listening purposes than compact disc. It sounds better than anything else out there. Some of these things do get the occasional vinyl release as well, which doesn't trail too far behind compact disc in terms of its quality. So in terms of digital media, though, I'm sure a lot of this stuff ends up as being, on bootleg sites and so on, if that's your thing. But otherwise, no, it's typically compact disc is the only way to do it. For my second rave, it is Twin Peaks, The Final Dossier, written by Mark Frost. This came out just last October 2017, very shortly after the limited event series ended. This came out. Unlike the previous book by Mark Frost, which was
Secret History of Twin Peaks.
Yeah, The Secret History of Twin Peaks.
I'm about halfway through that one.
Yeah, this deals more with, the concept behind this book is that Agent Tammy Preston, which anyone who's watched the limited event series will know, she wrote this dossier at the behest of Gordon Cole to help fill him in on what has happened in the 25 years since he was last in Twin Peaks with many of the townsfolk there. It primarily focuses on a lot of the characters that we don't really see in the limited event series, like Leo Johnson, Doc Hayward, Donna Hayward, the Martell family, and a few others. So in that regard, it's very interesting because for Twin Peaks fans, some of the major characters that do not appear at all in the limited event series, you're aching to know like what's going on, what happened with these guys. And so this does fill in a lot of the holes in that regard. It's pretty short. It's about half the size, half the length of The Secret History of Twin Peaks. I mean, this book is only for Twin Peaks fans. Obviously, the average reader is not going to pick it up and want to delve into this, but it's, I would say, pretty much essential reading if you're a big Twin Peaks fan and you want to know, hey, what happened between season 2 back in 91 and the limited event series in 2017. They worked out the histories for most of the major characters, Sheriff Harry S. Truman also. So, yeah, it's a great book for Twin Peaks fans. I say pick it up and geek out on Twin Peaks lore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll let you know when I'm done with it.
Ron will get his...
I'll have to borrow a copy because I'm looking forward to delving into it.
For sure. Yeah, I'd say it's more essential reading than The Secret History of Twin Peaks, which is kind of... Twin Peaks and its characters is kind of more peripheral in that book, whereas this one is pretty directly about just the major characters in Twin Peaks.
Very cool.
Ron, what do you got?
I have 2 movies to talk about. I'll start with the older one first. It's a 2016 film. It's called I, Daniel Blake. It's directed by Ken Loach, a UK director who specializes in working class people fighting the system. He's known for stuff like Riff Raff, Hidden Agenda, Lady Bird, not the same as the other one. That's terrific. Sweet 16. He did a movie with Cillian Murphy a few years ago called The Wind That Shakes the Barley, which was...
I loved that movie, yeah. That was very good.
Yeah, I think he's in his early 80s, but he's still fighting the system himself. He's a big social activist, and his films are very particular, almost like documentaries. They just capture a certain sense of life that most movies just gloss over. Yeah, this one's terrific. It stars Dave Johns, Haley Squires, and Brianna Shaw. After suffering a heart attack, a 59-year-old carpenter must battle bureaucratic forces of the system in order to receive his employment support allowance. Now, I know a lot of people out there might not want to watch a movie for an hour and a half or so about a guy trying to collect his social insurance or his employment benefits, but it is fascinating and gripping, gets you riled up, and really gets you involved in this character and his situation and the struggles that anybody, really all of us, have gone through. Bureaucratic dealings in our life to some extent, and you know how aggravating it can be to not be treated like a person, more like a number or something, right? And this movie epitomizes that. Very few guys really make films like this, and Ken Loach is a master, and it's terrific. I love it.
I've not seen a ton of Ken Loach, but every time I hear his name come up, it's always with the utmost quality regarding this film. So he gets great reviews, and I definitely would like to see more of them.
Yeah, check it out. It's on Netflix actually right now.
Okay.
And the Criterion Collection just came out with a really nice Blu-ray edition of it as well, with lots of nice bonus features and a little more insight into the situation that he's talking about in the film. So check out I, Daniel Blake. Very good film.
I'll add it to my Netflix list.
Yeah. My next movie is one from last year. It's called Detroit, directed by Catherine Bigelow. She's the one who made her name with movies like The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30. She specializes herself in taking these true life reenactments and bringing them to life. And this is a story I hadn't heard about. Like, you know, you'd mentioned that we're both kind of history buffs, right? And you're aware of some of the race riots that were occurring in the late 60s, like after Martin Luther King's death. I remember the Watts riot in LA was a big one. But I had never really heard much about this one in Detroit. It started off as a race riot and escalated quickly, bringing in the National Guardsmen. This movie focuses on one incident in particular. I'll give you my synopsis for it. During a major riot in Detroit during the summer of 1967, a racially charged event occurs at the Algiers Motel between the police, National Guardsmen, and an interracial group of innocent bystanders. I almost don't want to tell you much more than that. But it's one of those movies that drives you crazy when you're watching it, to think that this actually happened and that people were treated like this by the authorities. It stars John Boyega, Anthony Mackie, Malcolm David Kelly, Will Poulter, and Eddie Troy. Good cast of young actors. This Will Poulter, and you remember The Revenant? The guy who, besides Tom Hardy, who was left to look after DiCaprio after the attack. I don't know if you remember that actor at all, but he plays a police officer in this, and he's brilliant in this. He's scary and unnerving character, and the actor, terrific performance. Wow. Anthony Mackie's great in it. John Boyega's great. I just want to tell people to go see this movie without really giving them too much information, because the way the story unfolds and how the events escalate, you almost can't believe it. It's the kind of story that after you see the movie, you want to research the actual moment and find out exactly what happened, and are they really telling the truth about this, and could it be true? And as far as I know, it all is. It's a scary, terrific, I don't know what kind of adjectives you want to use for a movie like this. It's very captivating. It's interesting. It's socially charged. It's important. I know the Me Too movement is kind of eclipsing the Black Lives Matter movement, but this is a terrific movie. And just like The Post, very timely. Couldn't recommend it. If you're a fan of Catherine Bigelow, I think you would know the kind of work she does. And
Sounds very interesting.
I've heard other people talking about this too, and I had never heard of it before. And yeah, it definitely sounds, like you said, important and definitely worth educating yourself and watching it.
For sure. And gripping. I will tell you that. It grabs you right away. And like I said, you just can't believe where it goes. So that's 2 films. Neither one very upbeat, but both worth seeing. That would be I, Daniel Blake and Detroit. Okay. Shall we wrap it up for another week?
Let's do so.
We shall.
Okay. Next time we'll be back to discuss our year in review. We're going to look at some of our best and worst films of the year, some of the bigger news stories, and what we're looking forward to in 2018. Until then, please subscribe and give us a rating on our iTunes, Apple Podcasts. You can like and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if interested, you can always comment and search for our past reviews at our website, whyweseemovies@libsyn.com. Thank you for listening, and take care.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao for now.